right. Well, welcome to the first and only Red Hot research of this spring 2021 semester. I'm really pleased today that we will be co-hosting it, I suppose, with the KU Blockchain Institute and also the Spencer Museum of Art in the Integrated Arts Research Initiative program. And to that end, today's host, MC, is Clint Hirschman, who is a PhD student in philosophy and also the graduate fellow for ARI at the Spencer. So Clint, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you. So again, my name is Clint Hirschman, and like Emily said, I'm a graduate student in philosophy and this year's graduate fellow with the Integrated Arts Research Initiative, or ARI, at the Spencer Museum of Art. So ARI is an initiative that's committed to basically using art as a method of research. And so every year, ARI hosts an inquiry, which is a set of programming that lets KU faculty members sort of explore avenues and methods of research that they might not get to in the usual confines of their field. And so at this point, ARI is in the very early stages of the inquiry for the academic year of 2022 and 2023, which will be centered on blockchain. So if anyone's interested in seeing some of the ways to explore blockchain through art, Joey Orr has curated a temporary exhibit at the Brousseau Center for Learning at the Spencer Museum of Art, which you can check out. But I should also say that ARI's blockchain project and the KU Blockchain Institute are both being supported by a $2 million gift from the Silicon Valley cryptocurrency company Ripple, and Perry Alexander, who's a distinguished professor in the Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, was the one who approached ARI with the idea of using some of those funds for the blockchain project. So we sort of have him to thank for bringing in a lot of the support for blockchain-related projects here at KU. But with that out of the way, we'll move on to our speakers. So each speaker will have 6 minutes to give their presentation, and then we'll have 3 minutes for anyone to ask questions. And at the end of all 5 presentations, we'll have a few minutes for sort of synthesis. So our first speaker is Edmund Chung, who works in business analytics. So I'll hand it over to you, Edmund.
Thank you. And Emily, if you can share, yes. So today I'll be talking about the student organization I'm a part of, the KU Blockchain Institute, as well as one of our big projects, the Blockchain Research Initiative. So first, what is QB? So the KU Blockchain Institute is a student organization dedicated to promoting blockchain, as well as encouraging student involvement in blockchain-related research at KU. And we owe our existence in part to the financial services company Ripple Labs. They're the ones that donated the $2 million to help fund and support blockchain research at KU. And as I mentioned earlier, one of our big projects this year is the Blockchain Research Initiative, and I'll be talking about that more in greater detail. But first, I imagine that everyone here has a different level of experience with blockchain. So I want to give a quick introduction as to what it is to get everyone on the same page. So blockchain is a public ledger that stores data or information. And the blockchain itself is made up of individual blocks of data that are chained together. And each block has a bit of information, as well as something called a cryptographic hash, which helps verify the blockchain. And when a new block is created, the hash for the previous block is used to verify the identity and integrity of the new block, and that allows it to be added to the chain of blocks. And a new hash is generated to continue the process. And the function that's used to generate the hash are what help keep blockchain secure from tampering. And also, compared to databases that store data only in one place, blockchains are distributed across all of its users, and that makes them very reliable in cases of natural disasters. Like we saw a few weeks ago with that winter storm that came through the Southern Plains. And I think it's also important to make a distinction between blockchain and cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum. The table on the right-hand side explains some of the main differences, but generally, cryptocurrencies are a subset of blockchains that are used more or less specifically as financial instruments of some sort. But blockchain is more than just that. It can be used in a variety of applications outside of the financial sector, and many people at KU and elsewhere are researching the potential of blockchain technology in these fields. And so one of the questions is, how can students, and especially undergraduate students, participate in blockchain-related research? Well, first, those students would have to find it, but where would they go to find it? As you can see there on the slide, there's not really a single platform with which to find research in general at KU. For example, on the left-hand side, for unpaid research positions, there's the undergraduate volunteer research website. For paid research assistant positions, there's the Hire Jayhawks website on the right-hand side. And if you wanted to do research for, say, a capstone class or in the field that wasn't listed in either website, you would have to individually reach out to faculty and hope that they're doing research in the field that you're interested in and that they're willing to take you on, mentor you, and advise you. And so getting started in research can be a tedious process to navigate. And so with a blockchain research initiative, our mission is to create a platform that showcases blockchain-related research at the university. The goal is to facilitate student involvement in blockchain research at KU. And so our aim is to make it a one-stop shop of sorts for blockchain-related research at KU by listing ongoing projects and providing support to students wanting to get started in blockchain-related research. And as I mentioned previously, there is no listing of research out there. So at QB, we reached out to professors at KU to see whether they or their colleagues were doing blockchain-related research or would be willing to mentor students on their own independent projects. And through these efforts, we've compiled a list of ongoing blockchain research at KU on our website, and we took efforts to make the process student-friendly. As you can see on the right-hand side, screenshot of our website, we are still fine-tuning it right now and adding professors, but we will have descriptions of the research that each professor is currently involved in, as well as contact info on our website, so students can find and reach out to faculty doing blockchain research in the field of interest to them in an easy, accessible fashion. And so going forward, for blockchain research especially, the research process can be time-consuming or it might require additional equipment. So our future plan is to provide some funding directly to undergraduate students working on blockchain-related projects to help support their efforts, likely starting in the upcoming fall semester. And in the future, we are also hoping to, to connect with companies in Lawrence as well as in the KC metro area to host blockchain case competitions and secure additional funding and support for student-led innovation in blockchain research. And to help highlight KU's evidence for blockchain-related research, we also plan to list past research articles and other publications, working papers from students and faculty on our platform. And through all of these efforts, we hope to help students get involved in research and overall raise KU's national standing in blockchain-related research. And so I appreciate your attention in listening to me discuss the research initiative. And I invite all of you to please feel free to follow us on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, as well as take a look on our website if you're interested in participating in our initiative or would like to learn more about blockchain at KU in general. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Edmund. I should have said at the beginning, if anyone has questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat. But I guess I have a sort of question to start. So Edmund, you mentioned that blockchain is more than just cryptocurrency, so it has applications outside of just finance, which is probably what people typically think of when they think of cryptocurrency. I wonder if you could give any examples of, if there are any examples of work that the KU Blockchain Initiative has been involved in so far that maybe explores areas other than just cryptocurrency?
So I think my colleague, Rhett Phillips, will touch a little more on what he and his team are doing specific to the energy sector. And one of my other colleagues will talk about some of the research that has been done nationwide in regards to what blockchain can be used for. Right now, we are currently we're still in the early stages of setting up our initiative. So QB itself currently is not involved in any research. But as I mentioned before, our main line of focus right now is in trying to connect students with faculty and then to provide support to those students through funding opportunities as well as through business connections that might be able to better provide technical support to them.
Great. So we have a question from Joey Orr. He asked, does the KU Blockchain Institute host programming?
If you mean event programming, then yes, we do host and co-host events relating to blockchain. This coming month, I believe, we will be hosting one with the Key Entrepreneurship Club. So I invite you all to look forward to that.
Great. We have one other question from Sarah Lynn Reese-Hardy. What other universities are involved in the national landscape of blockchain?
And I think Joey just posted the link as well to Red Bull's University Blockchain Research Initiative. So like just speaking briefly on that, that is an initiative by Red Bull to help fund blockchain research nationwide. And that, or I should say internationally, most of the schools are in the United States. I believe there was one in the Netherlands as well as a couple of the UK. Big names in the blockchain space are, excuse me, are the University of Michigan. They also have a robust student organization as well as research into blockchain technology, as well as UC Berkeley also has a very robust student organization as well as academic program.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Edmund. I think we'll move on to our next speaker. So next we have Rhett Phillips, who's in the Department of Mechanical Engineering.
Alrighty. All right, can everyone see that all right? Okay, so my name is Rhett Phillips. I am the president of the KU Blockchain Institute, and I'll be presenting on my research into blockchain and the energy market. I have a couple colleagues working on this with me, so Grant Henry and Parker Ramirez. I'm not sure if they're in the audience or not, but currently we are working on a research paper for this, and we hope to have that out by the end of the summer. And then after we have done some more research on it, develop a proof of concept prototype to actually test some of our hypotheses. So really, what is the problem we are trying to solve here? Small carbon footprints and eco-friendly business models will be a license to operate within the near future. My research is focused on how blockchain-based solutions can disrupt the current practices of the energy market and provide value to customers. So what are some of those current problems in the energy market that I'm looking into? So currently, the energy market is very centralized. So you have monopolies or maybe one or two providers at most. So we saw potential flaws with this in the power outages nationwide. Another, I guess, potential problem with it is that it has a very hard time, the current energy grid has a very hard time with local power generation and distribution from prosumers. So what a prosumer is someone who both consumes energy and produces their own. So they could produce it through renewables on their house or small wind turbines. So we have optimized the process of taking energy from a central node and sending it out through distribution lines. But what's a lot more difficult is taking energy produced on a local basis, so like at someone's home, and then putting it back onto the energy market. So that kind of falls into my next point as far as outdated infrastructure. There really hasn't been a ton of change or new innovations in the last 30 years in the distribution of energy. It's still vertical integration, which is having your central energy provider, central power plant that sends energy out to cities or towns. Another difficulty currently is the integration of large-scale renewables. So again, it's set up currently with a central hub, but as we start introducing new energy sources onto the market through renewables, whether that be like a big solar field or more locally in someone's house, we're currently having problems with that. Another point is the integration of electric charging stations. So as EV technology becomes more and more mainstream, the peak power consumption in the US is going to increase, which could be problematic because right now we use gasoline. So how are we going to manage that new influx of power needing to be drawn from the grid? And kind of finally, a lot of the ways in which we produce energy currently use a large amount of fossil fuels, which are very carbon intensive and they leave a large carbon footprint. So you may be wondering at this point, how does this have anything to do with blockchain? And we'll get into that. So why do I view blockchain as a potential solution to a lot of these problems? First and foremost, I see the energy market in the future being more decentralized. So again, you're going to have local power generation, maybe on a per home basis. So people who will have solar panels in their house, they will have wind turbines on their house. So blockchain is a decentralized application that can manage this decentralized energy production. It operates on a peer-to-peer network, so you can transact with anyone on the network. It is also very secure. So there is cryptographic protocol behind blockchain that allow you to have transparency in how it's being operated, and assurance in a safe and trustworthy transaction. So when you kind of combine the decentralized nature and the secure nature of it, you can see that there's really not a need for intermediary third parties anymore. You can cut out a lot of inefficiency, because you can transact with anyone and have faith that your transaction is fair and valid. Blockchain can also be used autonomously. So there is a technology called smart contracts, which a smart contract is just a digital contract. Basically, if you have certain inputs, then you will get certain outputs. So kind of those 3 points in aggregate will get you to my last point, which is scalability. You could see how this might potentially be used on a large scale basis, whether that is for a local community, whether that is for a full city. There is far reaching implications. So this slide is diving into what exactly I'm researching at the moment. So the first one is peer-to-peer microgrids using smart contracts generated by prosumers. So as people generate energy, a lot of times they'll have excess energy. How the current system works is you have to contact the power company, you have to do paperwork, you send it back, it gets back on the grid, but all of this can take anywhere from 30 to 60 days, which when you think about it is very inefficient. But maybe in the future, if we had microgrids, you could transact with your neighbor. You could send energy to someone down the street, using blockchain and smart contracts, which is a pretty powerful thing when you think about it. There is also the use case of green token attributes. So all a green token attribute is it is a form of documentation saying you've used a certain amount of clean or renewable energy. And you could automate this process with smart contracts. Again, currently how this works is you will send pages and pages of Excel data into these places that validate this, which is very time intensive and inefficient. So if you could automate this process, you'd save a lot of time. Another really cool use case would be decentralized charging stations, for EV vehicles. So maybe as people started to generate their own energy, they could send it to a more local electric charging station. So let's say it was for a neighborhood. You could have like a neighborhoodal electric charging station in which everyone from that neighborhood contributes their excess energy to it, which again would be from clean renewable sources. There is another really cool application for smart buildings and homes. So again, running on smart contracts, you could optimize how much energy you are using in a building. And really what all this boils down to is the real-time analysis on the supply and demand of the energy market, which is pretty powerful in and of itself. I'm not sure how I'm doing on timing, but that's all I had. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask now, or you can connect with me at those resources.
Awesome. Thank you, Rhett. Once again, anyone who has questions, you can go ahead and put those in the chat. I guess one question I had was, you know, since you mentioned like the sort of scalability of these potential uses for blockchain in energy management purposes, do you have any sense of like the timeline for any of these ideas being implemented? Like, could something be changing soon, or is this still pretty far in the future?
A lot of it is tied to the viability of our current renewable power generations. So we've seen a lot of progress in solar panel technology just in the last 5 years. Um, so currently, it maybe isn't as economically feasible as I would hope it to be, but I see 5, 10 years from now, as there's a lot more innovation in that marketplace for producing renewable energies, this could become a very powerful and impactful thing. So it is forward thinking. So at the moment, it's probably best to be piloted and just understand the technology. But as the other technology catches up, it's going to be a very practical means in the future.
So Syed asked, so blockchain used in this way will replace power companies, at least in some terms of some of the things that they do?
Right. In the near future, it won't completely replace power companies. There'll still be some dependence because you need a surefire form of energy production because you can't control when the sun shines and you can't control when the wind blows. So let's say we have a really cloudy and cold week with no wind. You're gonna have a hard time getting that renewable energy. So you will need energy companies, central energy companies, to step in at that point and fulfill that energy demand. But in the future, there'll be less of a reliance on them because currently we're completely reliant on the energy companies as it is. And really, people have no power over it or means of producing their own energy.
So Richard asked, how many blockchain entities are there currently, and are transactions recorded across differing chains?
Um, I would say there is a few key players using blockchain technology right now. You can find hundreds of different people dabbling in this or looking into it. Um, and I guess maybe a good distinction is there is public blockchain and private blockchain. So, for example, a private blockchain is something Walmart and Sam's Club is currently using right now in their supply chain network, which Katie will talk more about later. But then there is a public blockchain, which is something like Ethereum uses or Bitcoin. And that's something that can be viewed across the entire network. And then there's differing chains.
Okay, great. Does anyone else have any questions for Rhett? All right, well, thank you, Rhett. I guess we'll move on to our next speaker, which is Syed Musab, who's in the Department of Philosophy.
Everybody, hold on 1 second. Just to make sure, are people seeing the slides correctly?
Yes, perfect.
So yeah, like Clint said, my name is Syed Musab. I'm from the Department of Philosophy here at KU. What I'll be mainly talking about is ethical and social concerns with blockchain and cryptocurrencies and versus fiat currencies. So the big question that I'll be looking at is whether cryptocurrencies can replace fiat currencies, at least as they stand today. So we will look at whether cryptocurrencies are stable enough as a currency. Are there any environmental concerns, if any? What about the autonomy of individual nations in the crypto economy? And how would countries respond fiduciary to national crises like COVID-19 pandemic if we had a crypto economy? So like Edmund said earlier, the main thing that blockchain provide, a really important thing that blockchain provide is a trust between two parties conducting a transaction.
without needing a third party like central banks. So the technology itself provides this trust. So I can't get into technology because of time, but that is one of the main positives that blockchain provides. So practical concern, one of the practical concerns with Bitcoin, because it's one of the most popular cryptocurrency right now, is it a currency? First, it's too unstable to be considered a currency right now, at least. You cannot plan for the future with BTC as your primary currency, at least as of today. So I come from some sort of a little bit of an accounting background, and it's hard to imagine how you would do accounting with Bitcoin, because what would your balance sheet that you did today mean for you 2 weeks from now, since it's so volatile? Bitcoin is, I mean, it's supposed to be a currency, but it's not really. It's more now, at least, like a security or a commodity that we trade, like stocks. There's intentional manipulation. There was the last surge that there was in January where it shot up to $40,000 in a short amount of time. A lot of people suspected that there was some big investors that manipulated the market, bought it in mass and sold it in mass to capture profit. There was also the Reddit buying spree of Ripple or XRP. So those are two things people are worried about in manipulation, at least with cryptocurrency. So like I said earlier, how would we respond to crises like COVID-19 or whatever, or something like that massive? So to take, for example, take the EU or the euro. So before the EU, the countries which are part of it now could devalue their currency to help, boost exports, lower trade deficits, attract tourism, stuff like that. Now being part of the EU, it's not that simple. Under the cryptocurrency system, countries would even lose more autonomy. Now with the EU, maybe the EU can get together as a whole and make a whole Eurozone decisions when it comes to it. But in a crypto economy, that seems harder to do. So if we were to imagine a BTC economy or crypto economy with no fiat currencies, what would that look like? So one thing we should keep in mind that currently cryptocurrencies seem to behave more like stock market than currencies. There was a recent study done by Demir and a few other authors that demonstrated that crypto markets behave very similar to stock markets, reinforcing the idea that cryptos are becoming like any other trading commodity and less like currency. So, and now coming back to the COVID response, what would this even look like? The US government was able to pump trillions of dollars just by passing a bill. How would this work with a pure crypto economy? Where would the coins even come from? What would they be worth? Who would get how much? It just seems difficult to do that with the crypto economy. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but these are some questions that we researchers ought to be addressing before we can make crypto a real currency. Some ethical concerns. The one that popped out to me the most and seemed relevant were environmental concerns. So the amount of electricity used to mine the BTC by some of the larger pools these days is the same as the entire nation of New Zealand or Ireland. That to me seems like a lot to just get one coin. And the question, I guess, is, are these environmental costs worth the decentralization of currency? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure. And I think, like it says on the slide, I think the real cost of these massive mining pools, we won't really know for a few years, if not decades. And this is one of the things when, especially, blockchain is a decentralization of wherever it's used. But in currency, at least, this seems to be one of the main things that it's popular about it, that is decentralized. But if we look at it, it really isn't. 4 major big pools control 52% of all BTC mining, which isn't very different from 4 banks, which control 44% of all financial transactions that happen. So I know the banking world and the mining world are not equivalent. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the power is concentrated in a small group of people in both industries. So in conclusion, I think cryptocurrencies have a long way to go to replace fiat currencies. It's difficult to see how they would even do that. Gary Gensler, who's the current SEC chair, said it will take about 10 to 12 years for proper regulations to come about. But we'll see. And so what do you do now, foreseeable future? I mean, I guess invest your money and see what happens. But unless you're a regulator, then, share your wisdom. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Syed. So we have a few questions. One from Richard. So Richard says, as I understand it, there's a limit on how many Bitcoin can exist. How's it determined when that number increases or is manipulated?
I think your microphone might not be quite. We just didn't.
Mine?
There you go.
Sorry, what was the question again?
So Richard says, as I understand it, there's a limit on how many Bitcoin can exist. So how's that determined when that number is increased, or how is it manipulated?
Oh, so it's not that I don't think the Bitcoin numbers, the total number can increase. What I was talking about manipulation is when people are like buying massive amounts to increase its value, not necessarily whether the number of Bitcoins can increase or decrease.
Okay, thank you. And Rhett asked, so he said Bitcoin operates on a proof of work validation system, which is, as you said, very energy intensive. Have you researched proof of stake validation methods at all?
Yeah, so I did look at that, and that is a little different. So in the presentation what I was talking about is currently where things stand, and that's why I wanted to keep, I guess justifying it that maybe in the future it could be better. And I think proof of stake is one of those ways to do that, to get rid of these, trying to come up with these hash functions, these, that takes a lot of energy. So, I mean, if that's, I think Ethereum or a couple of other people are doing proof of stake, which I think is a better method. But the point that I was making here is with how things stand right now, at least.
So Joey asked, is there any real benefit in investing in cryptocurrency today beyond speculation?
I can't really speak to that at all. I'm not gonna give investment advice, but and just, I mean, it's risky like anything else. So just do your own research, I guess.
Yeah, so you and Rhett had mentioned proof of stake. I wonder if you could explain what exactly that means.
So I'll give a message. So I just want to. Did I get disconnected? Okay, so I just want to make sure that I'm not a technical person. I'm not a computer science person from the philosophy department. But so right now, the way Bitcoin's mined is like what Edmund was saying earlier on, is when you a block is consisted of transactions or a ledger. And then to secure that, there's something called a hash function that you have to generate, which requires a lot of energy or requires a lot of processing power, which just takes more and more and more processing power as the complication of the hash function gets higher. Proof of stake is that each individual in the network provides something that they have stake of their own, like money or something of value, and they from there on they provide the trust between each node. That's the way, at least I understand it. But I think Rhett is a little bit more technical. Maybe he can answer this a little bit better than I did, or anybody else who has a better understanding of how the technicality of it is.
Any further questions for Syed? So I sort of had one other question. One thing that you mentioned was like the instability of cryptocurrency, which seemed to be sort of a practical, really an obstacle to the sort of practicality. Do you see there being any sort of solution to that in the future, or do you think that's going to be sort of a permanent feature of cryptocurrency?
There's certainly going to be a solution to that, just because, I mean, there's plenty of currencies in the world, fiat currencies, that are very unstable, but people are still able to do transactions with those. And I think as more regulations come along, I think it will stabilize itself. I mean, I'm not. I just I don't. I guess the whole point of the thing was just there's so many unknowns with cryptocurrencies, not necessarily the blockchain. But I think to answer your question, I think I think it will stabilize itself. I think a lot of the smaller coins will just dissipate, and some of the bigger players will stay there, and they'll get regulated. And recently, this hearing that happened with the Fed chair, the U.S. government is trying to come out with their own crypto coin, which, if that starts acting like a reserve currency for the rest of them, I think it will maybe stabilize all of them.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Syed. I guess we'll move on to our next speaker. So our next presenter is Fernando Machado Straddle, who's in the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology.
Right. Hi, everybody. Yeah, my name is Fernando. I'm an EV grad student, and I'm also in the ornithology division of the Biodiversity Institute. My research is mostly focused on birds, but today I want to talk about how we can use blockchain technology in natural history collections, but also museums in general. So, as you may know, museums store human artifacts and natural specimens that reflect the history of our planet. And traditionally, they have stored the data associated to their specimens in huge books or ledgers. And that data can be seen as events or transactions. With the advancement of technology, some institutions have been able to digitize their collections and make them available through global repositories like the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, GBIF. And we think that we are in a moment of time where we can take maybe a next step in terms of how we deal with biodiversity databases. So together with researchers from the ITTC, we are aiming to create a stable, secure, decentralized network that will store the history of museum collections, but also the history of their specimens, to aiming to improve data quality, data curation, and accessibility. So how can blockchain actually help? Here I'm showing a simplified version of or workflow from the moment we go to the field looking for birds, and we come back to the museum and prepare specimens and assign scientific names and labels to them until when the data of those specimens is shared in these repositories. And as you can make the analogy, it really looks like how data is incorporated into the blockchain with time. But sometimes this is done by different actors, and sometimes it requires changes. Also, it doesn't stop here. Data is constantly flowing from these valuable specimens thanks to big projects such as the Big 10K, which is using whole genome sequencing to study the relationships among species in the whole planet, and also projects like OBERT, which plans to CT scan all vertebrate species in the planet. And I'm taking an image from them that I think it depicts all the kinds of different data that we can extract from a single specimen. And this is in part thanks to emerging novel technologies. such as, advancements in computational science, but also image recognition through AI. And we can even get now 3D printed skulls. And we think that blockchain can be the link between the data streams that come from these different projects. And we foresee a network in which changes in biodiversity data are tractable, with the potential of having minimal data loss, and also when where queries can be flexible, basically customized to any actors or any actor needs in the network, within the network. You can imagine doing queries for what are the contributions of a certain actor in terms of which how this person has contributed with collections from a certain group in a certain region of the planet during a certain season of the year. So basically, what we're thinking is that this can be a step up from 2D spreadsheets of biodiversity data into a network where basically the whole history of a specimen and all specimens can be tractable. And I'm bringing two examples here on how we think blockchain can help, in particular for natural history museums. In general, these institutions don't have experts for every taxonomic group in the planet. And this is a quick query on GBIF that shows that more than 60,000 specimens of birds don't really have a taxonomic name, or there's some uncertainty on their scientific name. And if we build a network that it's open and has multiple actors, researchers in different institutions, and or even citizen scientists can contribute with ideas to this collection. So basically we can improve our data collectively. Also, I'm bringing this example from home. This is the Endangered Red Siskin, and it's from Northern South America. And it was described in 1820 with the name Carduelis cuculata, but in the last 30 years, it has had 4 different names that I show in the bottom. And what happens here is that every museum uses a different classification system for their collection. And that creates instability on global repositories. So basically, we think that blockchain can give the ability to museums to track these taxonomic changes within their collection and leverage things given a common language and increasing the quality of our data sets. In that sense, what we are aiming to do is to build this network. This is a project that is just starting, but what we would like to do is to have a network that can secure the history of specimens and collections, and doing this in an open and transparent and decentralized way. And we really see the potential on blockchain that blockchain has to improve museum data and how society uses and how it interacts with it. So with that, I would like to thank you all for your time. Give a shout out to my collaborators, and you can contact me through Twitter. And also I will take any questions you might have. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Fernando. So it looks like we have a question from Rhett. He says, can you talk about the current prototype that's being generated in partnership with the ITTC and KU Biodiversity Department, and has it helped make data management better for specimens and collections?
For sure, yeah. Basically, Tony and Benjamin are working on the prototype at the ITTC, and what we're seeing is that based on the data we have used, it can definitely a good attribute it has is that it can improve our queries or any type of queries. Like we think now we're having a new stream of data on a patch new specimens that we're collecting on house sparrows, that invasive species, and we're gonna be working on that. But definitely for a Mongolian data set of birds specimens, it shows great potential on how data can be edited, but without losing information. Yeah, thanks.
Great. It looks like we have another question from Joey. He says, who has access to the institution's chain? So for instance, can citizen scientists participate in the contribution of knowledge about specimens? And how do such contributions relate to those of specialists in the field?
So right now in the prototype, it's a private blockchain, right? But the idea is that it will be open and different actors will suggest these identifications. And basically the curators could use that information to like validate the identification if they would know. Now with birds, it's kind of tricky because birds and mammals are really well known, but there's a ton of groups of arthropods, insects, invertebrates that like most museums don't have experts on those groups. So it would be really valuable. I think maybe I didn't stress this enough because of time, but one other good thing from incorporate blockchain to museums, it would be to recognize the contributions of these different actors, how citizen science are really important to the advancement of biodiversity, informatics and biodiversity in general.
Great, thank you. Syed commented, so it's still true that one organism can get multiple names, like you said. I wonder how often, do you have a sense of how often that happens, or how much of a problem that's been up to this point?
So it cannot have multiple names at the same time, but new evidence, molecular evidence, or even studies like CT scans can bring new data that can create inconsistencies in current taxonomy. So people decide either to lump or split species, and that generates new names. The monitor. Yeah, we usually think that taxonomy is stable, and that would be the ideal, but it actually changes a lot. It has changed a lot in the last 20 years.
Do you have anyone have any more questions for Fernando? Yeah, so Syed said, so blockchain would help to keep track of that. You think this could be a pretty reliable way of keeping track of that?
I do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Fernando. We have one more speaker, Katie Ballantine, who's in business marketing and French. So I'll hand it over to you, Katie.
Okay, hi everyone. My name's Katie. I'm the director of marketing for Kubi. Hold on one sec. Okay, so blockchain, as we've all kind of gone through this whole presentation, it goes a little bit further than just engineering and like in a lab and all that kind of stuff. So, okay. So a little fun fact first, 1 in 10 medical products used by low and middle income countries is falsified. And this is estimated by the WHO over various studies over the past couple of years. And it goes even a little bit further than that too. 1% of all drugs in the US also are falsified. And in the grand scheme of things, if there's millions of $1 million or millions of products a year that are coming out that are within the pharma industry, it's a pretty good chance of getting something that is falsified. So to back up to 1982, there were the Tylenol murders. This happened in Chicago. 7 people were left dead. And Tylenol is a branded acetaminophen. They come in capsules, and in the 1982, they had been laced with potassium cyanide. So while they didn't have this technology back in 1982, moving into the 21st century, there's ways that we can prevent this. And currently, some pharmaceutical companies, from what I've read, are kind of looking into blockchain research. And even a company that I just interviewed with, they were very excited about hearing more about blockchain stuff. So unfortunately, with the whole the business world, people obviously want to make money, and you can make a lot of money off making counterfeit drugs and stuff. So had blockchain been in place in 1982, there's a much less likelihood that that could have happened. And to this day, that case has never been solved. Nobody ever found out who committed the murders. And, you know, having a blockchain in place not only lets consumers, or no, it doesn't let the producer know that it's okay and that their products are making it there, that they're not counterfeited, but we can also market that to the consumer. And being able to market blockchain, giving consumer confidence, that gives companies a differentiating advantage to boosting how they communicate with their consumers. So I guess, yeah, consumer confidence is just being able that, knowing that we can make these smart contracts and efficiently carry these products to the consumers, and they have peace of mind knowing that their products are coming safely to their doorstep and there's no interaction in between. There's a greater chance of there being success, and it's more efficient. So last semester, we also had a presentation or a speaker event with Sam's Club where we had 2 of their employees come. It was really cool. But going back to Sam's Club and their use of blockchain, a couple years ago, I'm sure we all kind of remember this, there was the romaine lettuce E. coli breakout, and there was millions of dollars of products pulled off the shelf between Walmart, Sam's Club, any grocery stores. It hit Chipotle really bad too. A lot of people got really sick. So Sam's Club started to focus in on the current use of blockchain and being able to gear towards the fresh produce traceability. And they say that's from farm to the fork. So within the supply chain process, they start in a section of the field. They're able to trace where that romaine lettuce comes from in this circumstance. And then each step along the way, they're able to trace what happened to it, where it came in contact with anything, what specific things came in contact with this section of romaine lettuce. So Sam's Club is one of the companies that is making a really great use out of fresh produce traceability by using blockchain currently. So I will open it up to any questions.
Great, thank you, Katie. So we have a question from Syed. So he asked, could you explain what you mean by falsified?
Yeah, for sure. So kind of going back to like the Tylenol murder thing, they were falsified because somebody laced the products that were getting to the consumers. So in that circumstance, it was potassium cyanide, but drugs can be falsified as in somebody is selling like a product that's not necessarily regulated by the FDA, or they're missing pieces in between the process and they're not going through the correct process that normal supply chain would have for that said product. It might miss a step and end up in the wrong place. So yeah.
Great, thank you. So we have a question from Rhett. He asked, how might the E. coli outbreak or the Tylenol outbreak have been prevented using a blockchain? What exactly would have been different in those cases?
Yeah, so prior to the E. coli breakout and Sam's Club using blockchain, there's just a normal supply chain process where, you know, they harvest it from the field, put it on a truck, goes to wherever it needs to go, to the store, to your plate. If they had blockchain in the sense of E. coli and romaine lettuce, they would have said it came from this farmer down to this field, down to this specific portion of the field. They have it tracked within a blockchain that says where it's from, every step it went along the way, and the data from each transaction is involved in each block.
Great, thank you. So that seems kind of related to this question from Dawn, who asked, can you explain how blockchain would be used to track that lettuce in the field? Is there, you mentioned there's some sort of transaction that happens at each step along the way. That's how you're able to track it. Is that correct? Or how exactly does that work?
I believe so. Rhett, do you want to explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So there is RFID tags you can scan. So you would scan this RFID. Basically, it's just like a signifier. That data gets uploaded into a blockchain, which is kept on a ledger that Sam's Club has internally. So basically, if there was an outbreak, you could go back to that set of data attached to the RFID and figure out what went wrong or where it went wrong.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's see, we have lots of questions here. Adam asked a question. So are there challenges in educating companies or consumers about the advantages of blockchain technology over traditional supply chain approaches? I guess what exactly do you feel is the perception among companies and consumers of these technologies?
Yeah, for sure. So at least with students, it's definitely hard for us to kind of wrap our minds around. It's been hard for the past year for me to kind of even like continue to learn more about blockchain. And most people feel it's pretty intimidating. You don't know much about it. And you hear blockchain, you kind of get dissuaded from it. Same thing goes in the business world as well. With these interviews for internships I've been doing, where they all ask about blockchain, they don't know much. It's hard to be kind of educated. It's very niche. There's a lot of very big words and stuff. So it does get kind of confusing, and that makes the education process of it, people are a little bit less likely to want to be educated because they don't feel that there's a need for it. But I definitely think that as we like progress, more people have become more and more interested in it.
Great, thank you. I think we just have time for one more question. So here's a question from Joey. So is blockchain use in agriculture accessible to local or decentralized farmers?
So with Sam's Club, since it's a private blockchain, for them, I don't believe that that would be like accessible information that you as the public could get. I think it could become something in the future where you could market that to the consumer on an app or something and say, look at every single step of the process per your item that you purchased that's connected through like the code that you scan on the back of it. But it's it's a big process. It's a lot of money. It's a lot that you have to invest in implementing this kind of process, which is why companies that are more big pharmaceutical companies or Sam's Club that has that ability to put something that's that big in place when they have so much money on the table rather than a local farmer.
Great. Well, thank you, Katie, and thank you to all of our presenters. It looks like we're out of time, but yeah. So thanks to all of our presenters, and thanks to everyone else for attending this event.
Thank you. This was very interesting overall.
I think in true Red Hot research fashion, this is literally the launch of something new and exciting. So thanks for Joey, coordinating a lot of this, but just want to say thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye, everyone.